From the 11 Alive studios, this is the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Good Sunday morning and welcome in. I'm Zach Merchant. Faith is out this week. Voters in Georgia's 13th congressional district will have to wait a couple more weeks for their next representative in Congress. The race is headed to a runoff between two Democrats. The winner will finish the term of the late Congressman David Scott. The August 25th election, the runoff election, is between Scott's daughter, Marcy, and Everton Blair. They were the top two finishers in this week's special election. The winner next month will serve in Congress through early January. Georgia's 13th district includes parts of 6 metro Atlanta counties: DeKalb, Clayton, Gwinnett, Rockdale, Henry, and Newton. Coming up here on the Georgia Vote shortly, you can hear from both Scott and Blair as the election heads into overtime. Now to the race for U.S. Senate. Less than 100 days from the general election in November, Republican Congressman Mike Collins hopes to unseat Democratic incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff. On Thursday, Collins held a press conference aimed at sharing his health care policy priorities, but it abruptly ended when he was asked about controversial remarks made by his son-in-law. 11 Alive's Doug Richards was with Collins in Monroe County and shows us what happened.
Congressman Mike Collins touted his event here in Forsyth as a press conference, which raised some expectations that he might answer questions. The Republican nominee for U.S. Senate had completed a tour of a small hospital 60 miles south of Atlanta. His campaign event came on the heels of revelations on CNN that his son-in-law, David Alan Scheer, has an online presence sharing anti-Semitic and white nationalist views.
You know, we fully addressed that.
It's an issue Collins declined to address when asked about it repeatedly at the press conference.
Voting for men being in women's locker rooms.
Could you address the
Jon
question
Ossoff
regarding anti-Semitism?
should answer.
The Republican faces Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff this fall.
Could you address his question, please, sir?
Instead, Collins changed the subject, then abruptly stopped answering questions. It turns out Collins did answer 2 questions last weekend about his son-in-law in a chat with WABE Radio.
He is not involved with our campaign at all. Listen, nobody speaks for me, and I don't speak for anybody else. There's no room in this world and in this country for any anti-Semitism. I've always denounced it. I don't care where the source is from.
You don't want to talk about your son-in-law?
Thank you very much.
At all? For the candidate, that was sufficient, despite questions that may continue to linger. In Monroe County, Doug Richards, 11 Alive News.
Congressman Collins, during his visit to the Monroe County Hospital, focused instead on his health care policy, which he says includes greater price transparency, lowering drug prices, and expanding health savings accounts. The Ossoff campaign, however, continues to emphasize that CNN reporting on Congressman Collins' son-in-law. The Democratic senator invited reporters to a virtual press conference on Thursday, just a couple hours before Congressman Collins' event in Monroe County.
He needs to apologize for his office's ties to white supremacists. He needs to release every single email, text message, and communication between his office and these white supremacists. And he needs to finally answer the question you've all been asking him for 2 weeks and that he's refused to answer, which is how much did he or his businesses pay this neo-Nazi for his services?
All right, a lot to talk about here. Let's bring in our Politics Roundtable right now. Joining us today, we have Stephen Lawson, a Republican communications strategist who has served as a senior communications advisor to Georgia House Speaker John Burns. He's also worked for Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Congressman Mike Collins at times. And Maria Andrade, Democratic strategist and co-founder of First Edition Strategies. She's a veteran political advisor with experience also in advertising and nonprofits. And joining us from the AJC, Chief Politics reporter Greg Bluestein, also an author and a contributor to MS Now, all returning panelists. We appreciate you guys, as always, joining us on another busy week in Georgia politics. Stephen, let's start with you. You're the Republican on the panel. What did you make of Congressman Collins' response in that press conference?
Well, I think he clearly said that this is something he's addressed. He's now said it on 3 different occasions that these are comments that he does not support, that he speaks for himself, that his son-in-law does not have anything to do with the campaign. I think the question is how many more different ways can he answer it? Obviously, Greg was at the press conference. I think that's the question, and it's a fine line that he's going to continue to have to straddle. But really, I think this is just a distraction, and it's what Jon Ossoff wants, which is a distraction anything but his record. Jon Ossoff has yet to release any sort of policy proposal anywhere close to what Mike Collins was talking about, and he doesn't have the record in the Senate to run on. So he's clearly going to be doing a press conference every single day trying to talk about this issue and to, assassinate Mike Collins' character because he wants to distract from what this race should be about, which is about records and vision for the future of the state. All
right, Maria, let's bring you in. You're the Democrat here. Where do Democrats stand on this Senate race, the comments, the press conference, and how do you respond to Stephen's comments here?
Yeah, Mike Collins has clearly shown multiple times, not just in this instance, that he has ties to white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And yes, he said he's addressed this over and over again, but he hasn't really addressed it. He continues to say that over and over again. And ultimately, this shows the type of senator that he would like to be, one that is more interested in his political gains as opposed to responding to the people of Georgia.
Greg, you were there. You were at this press conference, and you've been following this situation for the better part of the last 10 days or so. Take us inside your latest reporting here.
Yeah, so Stephen's right, for one. Senator Ossoff is egging this on. He's had multiple press conferences, multiple gaggles with reporters in Washington and Atlanta focusing on this issue because it serves his interest. But also, this was a rare opportunity for Congressman Collins to address not just one or two reporters. He's done an interview with us at the AJC and maybe with WABE, but this was an opportunity for him to talk to 7 different cameras representing outlets from all across Georgia. And it was interesting to me that he just said he's already addressed this and tried to pivot. I expected him to address it and then to pivot.
And Greg, I don't mean to cut you off, but you have some new reporting on a meeting between Congressman Collins and about 50 members of the Jewish community in Georgia this week that ended with, well, you tell us how that ended.
Yeah, it was the night before that event, and it was a already long-planned discussion, not a fundraiser, but a discussion at a prominent Jewish member of the community's house. He brought in about 50 other Jewish leaders. And I talked to him, his name is Kirk Halpern, who told me he came away impressed and essentially said, look, if I was in a fight against neo-Nazis, there's one person I want in that room, that is Mike Collins. So obviously his answer in his comments have allayed some of those concerns to some members of the community, but there are others, and we've heard from plenty of them, who want to see more from Mike Collins, him to elaborate more publicly.
All right, always a lot to talk about here. We're going to continue to follow this. We are going to shift gears here now, though, to another major race with big implications, and that is the race to become Georgia's next governor. So with Governor Brian Kemp's tenure ending in about 5 months, one of these two candidates will succeed him. Healthcare executive Rick Jackson is the Republican nominee. Former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms is the pick from the Democrats. In the past week, Bottoms took questions during a town hall, while Jackson announced a big ad buy. Here's Gilad Malamed with more.
I feel good about our campaign. I'm going to feel great when we win.
Candidates for governor hoping to reach voters any way they can. Democratic nominee Keisha Lance Bottoms took to the stage at a town hall in Atlanta Monday evening. Earlier in the day, Republican nominee Rick Jackson's campaign announced an $87 million ad buy, a monster number for a statewide race in Georgia. In a statement, his campaign says Rick Jackson has spent this campaign showing up in places candidates usually skip, and this buy makes sure all 11 million Georgians hear the same thing the people in those rooms have heard, which is that he is running to fight for them. When asked how her campaign can counter this,
we're going to do what we need to do with what we have, whatever that amount is. I'm not surrendering, saying I won't have that much money, but I'm saying whatever we have, we're still going to take our case directly to the people of this state.
The town hall finished with a group picture.
There's been a lot of conversations recently about candidates and pictures.
After the moderator alluded to Jackson's posts from visits to Black-owned businesses, like his Sunday meal at Big Daddy's Dish on Old National Highway in Fulton County. The restaurant is now one of the latest Black-owned businesses Jackson's visited that's receiving some online criticism.
By no means am I endorsing anybody right now.
Owner Marcus Sabir says after Jackson ate, the two spoke about their upbringings and different issues that need to be addressed. After being at this location for 2 decades, he says he's surprised and saddened when people say they will no longer go to his restaurant because he took a picture with Jackson.
Because I was nice to him, and I took a picture with him, and I didn't act like a savage, and I wasn't mean to him and his entourage. And I'm not going to do that with anybody that come in this restaurant.
Bottoms called Jackson's recent visits theatrics and something she does not consider campaign stops.
I live in Southwest Atlanta. I'm surrounded by Black businesses, so I don't have to carry a camera crew with me every time I walk into one.
And that was our Gilad Malamed reporting there. Back now with our Politics Roundtable. Maria, let's start with you. Does that gentleman have a point who runs that restaurant?
Don't think that for 1 second the Jackson campaign was not extremely calculated in making that stop right to that restaurant. The burden should not be placed on the restaurant or the people who are part of that stop. The burden should be placed on the campaigns, and this is very much a tactic for Rick Jackson to not appear like this out-of-touch billionaire, and it's really important that we see it through that lens.
Stephen, what do you make of it?
Well, first of all, I think it is incredible that Rick Jackson is continuing to broaden his tent, go to minority-owned businesses, go to black-owned businesses to share his message and his story. Remember, this is someone who grew up in Techwood Homes and has pulled himself up and has lived the American dream, going on to found his Jackson Healthcare Company. And so I think to be able to share that story and to listen to small business owners, for those business owners to be, attacked for doing that, I think is just everything that's wrong with society. I think anybody that wants to have their voice heard and to be supported should be, regardless of whatever aisle, whatever end of the political spectrum you're on.
Greg, let's bring you in. Let's talk about some money here. And by some, I mean quite a bit. Earlier this week, Rick Jackson's campaign announced an ad reservation for TV and digital worth $87 million. There was also some news on the Senate front about $15 million announced in a campaign from a public policy organization, a conservative public policy organization known as One Nation, that is critical of Senator Jon Ossoff. That's a lot of Republican ad spending, pushing $100 million already. How does that influence the race where it is right now?
Yeah, starting with the governor's race, Rick Jackson's now the 6th highest spending entity in this entire campaign cycle, and that is including, the big giant Washington groups that are spending tens of millions of dollars. It gives you a glimpse at how he's been. We've already seen it in the first round, but he's going to be very willing to open his wallet in the second round too. On the Senate race, it was an important show of support for Mike Collins because we know the narrative. We've seen the polls that show Jon Ossoff up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points. All these polls, we know he has the financial advantage. So seeing One Nation and seeing the Senate Leadership Fund, which is the other PAC that's agreed to pledged to spend $44 million, is a show of support for Mike Collins at a time when Republicans here are very nervous. They're very anxious about how his campaign is being waged.
30 seconds to each of you, and then we got to wrap. Stephen, are Republicans nervous and anxious?
I don't know that they're nervous or anxious, but the political environment is clearly trending the Democrats' way. I don't think that's any secret. I think that was a big boost for Mike Collins to get that significant financial support to level the playing field with Jon Ossoff. I think that's going to be a big boost for him.
And Maria, last word to you. How do Democrats counter this spending?
I think Jon Ossoff is running a very intense and successful grassroots campaign, and I think voters are going to see right through all this spending that the Republicans are doing.
That was perfectly 30 seconds, right on the button. That's why we keep inviting you guys. Much more of the Georgia Vote to come right after this. More than 20,000 residents of Georgia's 13th congressional district voted in this week's special election. That is a turnout of only 4%, not particularly surprising in a summer election that is a special election with only one race on the ballot. It was a 5-person race. 2 Democrats now advance to the runoff next month. Marcy Scott, the daughter of the late Congressman David Scott, and former Gwinnett County School Board Chief Everton Blair. Both candidates joined us this week for one-on-one interviews. We begin with our conversation with Marcy Scott, who has made securing appropriations funding the top priority of her campaign. What is your message to voters now that they have yet another election to come out for?
Well, I'm keeping my message the same, which is basically making sure that we get the $40 million down and the money that has been requested for the district. It's very important. We don't have a lot of time to accomplish a lot during this term, but that is one thing we can definitely do. And I emphasize to people, if we don't take advantage of this, the money will go away. So we have to make sure that you have somebody in office that's knowledgeable of the projects and that have the connections with the individuals like the county commissioners and the other local officials that are tied to these projects.
Do you support the continuation or the cessation of the war in Iran?
Well, the thing is that it definitely has not been good. I label it as Trump's war, and it could be a forever war. It's not good for the country. The prices are going up. You've got gas going up. Me specifically, honestly, as a constituent and on my own end, I would definitely vote to end the war. I don't see any benefit in it at this point. But like I said, as a legislator, I would want to get into the nuts and crannies of it and just make sure that there's nothing tied to the bill that would be adverse for my constituents.
We talked with Everton Blair this week as well. He joined our Jennifer Bellamy for an extended interview on Thursday where he laid out his priorities.
We need to have more capacity and more innovation and honestly just fresh ideas so we can be leading forward. And I believe that there's so much at stake right now that no matter how long or short your time of service can be, to have a bold leader who is battle tested and also unafraid to take on the powerful and unbought and unbossed by anybody else provides us with an opportunity to really show people what good leadership could look like. And we need to do more. Things are way too crazy up there, and not enough is being done for hardworking families down here, and we cannot continue to lead with a status quo regime or agenda. We've got to adapt, we've got to change, and we've got to do better for our hardworking families in this community.
Where do you stand when it comes to the war or conflict in Iran?
I would have definitely signed on to the Massey Amendment and his war powers resolution. I believe that this war in Iran makes no sense for the American people to be investing and doing any sort of war on the behalf of another country. So we need to end that war as soon as possible. And I believe that we need to rein in this administration from going rogue and taking actions that are not only unprecedented, but also illegal.
And those were just parts of our extended interviews. You can watch our full conversations with both candidates available right now on the 11 Live streaming platforms. And you can check out our full coverage of this election and all elections. There's been a lot of them this year. That's all on 11alive.com. We're back now with some folks who know all about elections. They have covered them. They've been a part of them. Our political roundtable is back. Stephen, you said something in the first block of the show talking about the national political landscape. I want to get your thoughts, then everybody's thoughts on this. There's some new polling out in the last week or so. An AP poll had President Trump's approval at 33%. A Quinnipiac poll released just a couple days ago had it at 32%. What does that mean for Republicans who are going to be on the ballot in less than 100 days?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are headwinds nationally. I don't know if his polling numbers are that bad, but I do think that they are significantly underwater. I think that's fair to say. I think that's going to be a lot more hurtful probably for Mike Collins against Jon Ossoff in that federal race, because that race is federalized and nationalized. I think the question for Rick Jackson and some of the other down ballot races, are they sort of able to create some distance? There is a different story in Georgia. Republicans in the state, I think, have done a phenomenal job leading our state, creating economic opportunities and prosperity. I think it'll be really interesting for Rick Jackson and others to see if that's the lane that they lean in to differentiate themselves a little bit.
Maria, 30 seconds to you. What do Democrats do to try to take advantage of this moment?
I think all of these Republicans who, whether it is Mike Collins, whether it is Jackson, whether it is all these down ballot candidates who stood with Trump at the Wheeler High School rally that he hosted and got publicly endorsed by Donald Trump. I think it is up to the Democrats to make sure that every voter knows that, because Trump is underwater significantly in Georgia, and voters, swing voters, independents, all of the voters who are going to make the call of who's going to be the next representative, the next governor, they are going to see it for what it is.
Greg, last word to you. We've seen a lot of things change in Georgia politics late in the game sometimes. Could this all change before Election Day?
Yeah, I mean, what's clear in Georgia nowadays is Republicans can't win a statewide election just with their base. They've got to reach the middle. They've got to reach those swing, decisive voters that have decided the last couple of elections in Georgia. And right now what we're seeing from Republicans is, yeah, they're reaching out to the base, but they're also embracing the president. And I have not really seen that much distance between any of the top candidates and the president. We saw that at Wheeler High School when Rick Jackson took the stage and repeated his pledge that he would be Trump's favorite governor.
We're going to continue to keep a close eye on it. Stay with us. Much more to come right after the break. All right, back now for another edition, another segment, a lightning round with our Politics Roundtable here. We're going to go down the line. Big takeaways from this week in Georgia politics, Maria.
Biggest takeaway is that Mike Collins refuses to apologize and respond to the people of Georgia about his clear ties with neo-Nazis and white supremacists throughout the state.
Stephen?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is the amount of money that's coming in on the Republican side, both from Mike Collins and Rick Jackson. Rick Jackson putting $87 million, Mike Collins getting $60 million. I think that is going to go a long way to give them a fighting chance to win in November.
Greg?
It's August now. We're heading towards that home stretch. Things are beginning to heat up even more in Georgia politics, and I'm just watching the Democratic Party. You know, they feel like they have the wind at their backs, but they've also been in this position before, and they have these advantages. They have Donald Trump's flagging approval ratings, but can they leverage that? Can they make the most of that? We're gonna find out.
The lightning round went back extra quickly. We have another 20 seconds. Greg, I'm going to give you the extra last word here. What's going to be the defining issue of this race? As you go out, you're reporting, you're talking to voters. We spent a lot of time talking about the controversies. What's going to be the defining issue for voters?
I still think it goes back to what everyone's talking about, which is affordability, right? Republicans are talking about it, Democrats are talking about it, but there's very different prisms in which they view affordability. We're hearing tax cuts from Republicans. We're hearing other issues like healthcare expansion for Democrats. So I think that's what this race will really boil down to.
I see a lot of nodding here. Stephen, do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. That's clearly the data and the polling show that every time, and I think that's going to be the fight to the finish. Whichever candidates do a better job of putting a vision forward on the affordability issue is probably going to win.
Maria, for real this time, about 20 seconds left. Do you agree?
Absolutely. We've seen in the recent era people that grocery prices are one of the things that are moving voters the most, and I think that's going to be really important to highlight.
It always seems to come back to the economy. And we're going to know for sure, Election Day, less than 100 days away. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, it is hard to believe, but it is already back to school time all across Georgia. Democratic U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock says the costs of school supplies are rising. He cited his own study in which he examined fourth grade school supply lists from 5 schools in the state. He said the average cost per child is $130 and called for expanding the child tax credit under the American Family Act.
Under this legislation, families would receive up to $360 per month for kids under 6. And $300 per month for kids aged 6 to 17. That is real money in families' pockets to cover essential costs like school supplies, tutoring, or child care.
Democratic Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado introduced that legislation back in April. The last increase of the child tax credit came in the summer of 2025 as part of the reconciliation law, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill, a major priority of President Donald Trump's. Thanks for watching us today. We hope to see you back here again next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.